You don't fail because you're stupid. You fail because you let the world shape your mind and called it intelligence. You mistake fast thinking for smart strategy. You confuse clever words with controlled presence. You learn everything, but apply nothing. And you wonder why the weak outnumber the wise. Let's be clear, intelligence has never been the problem. The problem is this: you've never learned to weaponize it. You've been taught to read more, to feel more, think more, but not once did they teach you how to control what you allow in, how to defend your attention, how to command your emotions, how to think strategically instead of compulsively. So let me ask you, if your intelligence doesn't make you calm, doesn't make you powerful, doesn't make you unshakable under pressure, then what is it really doing for you? A sword isn't powerful because it exists. It's powerful when it's sharpened and wielded with precision. Your mind is no different. Without discipline, it cuts you instead of cutting through. This is not a video about how to feel smarter. This is a 15-lesson warpath to becoming someone they can't manipulate. You won't be praised for walking this path, but if you finish it, you won't need their praise. You'll have something better: control. Let's begin. You don't get power by reading more. You don't earn respect by being the smartest person in the room. And you don't escape manipulation by memorizing theories about manipulation. That's the trap. He reads 5 books a month, but still apologizes when lied to. He knows all the rules of the game, but still plays by someone else's emotions. He memorizes Nietzsche, but can't say no when his dignity is insulted. This is not intelligence. This is noise, decorated with big words and fragile pride. Control is not intellectual. Control is psychological. And if your intellect is not tied to your ability to withhold, to redirect, to remain still in chaos, then it is useless. Because power is not about what you know. It's about how you control what you feel, what you say, what you allow. A man with control walks into a room and doesn't need to announce anything. He lets the silence shape the atmosphere. He lets others speak first. He listens and he calculates, because that's what control looks like. Not performance, not noise, just stillness that scares people. If you're still trying to be understood, you're not in control. If you're still trying to prove yourself, you're not in control. If you're still leaking information, reacting emotionally, or explaining your decisions to people who don't deserve them, you are not in control. You're not strategic. You're leaking, and the world is reading you like a blueprint. A man with control doesn't seek validation. He uses rejection as data. Weaponizing. He watches, and when he strikes, it's not emotional, it's final. Do you want to be heard or obeyed? Do you want to be understood or respected? Do you want to be known or feared? Because these are not the same paths. And intelligence, the kind the world claps for, will often sabotage all three. Why? Because most intelligent people are addicts. Addicted to being right, addicted to being seen, addicted to the idea that their knowledge protects them from betrayal, failure, or rejection. But the world does not run on knowledge. It runs on pressure. It runs on timing. It runs on perception. If you can't hold your tongue when you're insulted, if you can't sit with discomfort without explaining yourself, if you can't let them misunderstand you without needing to clear it up, you don't have control. You have intelligence with no brakes. And a car with no brakes is not fast. It's suicidal. Your mind is not your weapon, unless your instincts are under command. And no, commanding yourself isn't about suppressing emotions. It's about training the muscle that decides what gets seen, when it gets seen, and by who. Because if they can read you, they can use you. If they can predict you, they can control you. And if they can trigger you, They can trap you. You weren't ignored because you were dumb. You were ignored because you were readable. You were manipulated because you were expressive. You were underestimated because you were accessible. And deep down, you knew it. You thought intelligence would free you, but it only made your failure look poetic. And they clapped, not because they respected you, but because your fall looked elegant. Intelligence doesn't create gravity. Control does. Control of your face, your tone, your narrative, your visibility. You don't get to cry, explain, overthink, panic, apologize, and still call yourself powerful. You get one move, and if it's not controlled, it's corrupted. This is why the most powerful men are often underestimated at first, because control doesn't shine. It waits. It doesn't shout. It watches. And when it moves, it's irreversible. You are not dangerous because you're smart. You're dangerous when you're unreadable. And the moment you stop performing intelligence, you start becoming the threat. Quick thinking is not a sign of intelligence. It's a sign of programming. The faster you respond, the easier you are to read. And the easier you are to read, the faster you're controlled. That's the real game. No one told you about. You think speed means power, but predators don't chase what runs fast. They chase what runs first. Impulse is not instinct. Reflex is not reason. So ask yourself this: when someone offends you, when a room goes quiet, when power shifts around you, do you pause or do you rush to fill the silence? Every time you respond without calculation, you broadcast your code. You reveal where to poke, where you break, and where you bleed. That's why Machiavelli warned, the man who shows all his thoughts leaves nothing to be feared, and the man who speaks first loses his leverage before he even knows the stakes. You think you're being smart when you answer fast. But here's the truth. Quick reactions are recycled reactions. You're not thinking. You're reusing the same pattern over and over, mistaking comfort for clarity. It feels like confidence, but it's just automation. You're walking the same mental paths every day like a rat in a maze. Quick to judge, quick to justify, quick to defend yourself from threats no one has even made yet. That's not mastery. That's programming. And every room you walk into, the ones who are truly dangerous, they see it, they smell it, and they stay quiet. Because they know the moment you open your mouth, they've already won. Do you understand what this means? Your fast answers, your clever comebacks, your need to prove something in the moment. They make you visible. They make you vulnerable. And worst of all, they make you predictable. A predictable man cannot hold power because his enemy doesn't need to attack. They just need to wait. This is why the sharpest minds sit still. They delay. They observe. They give no opinion until it's needed. And when it lands, it cuts. You want to become dangerous. Slow your mind. Sharpen it. Like a blade dragged across stone. Don't rush to speak. Force them to speak first. Don't explain your position. Let them wonder if you even have one. And when the time comes, strike with precision, not emotion. Understand? In strategy, speed is not power. Restraint is. A Machiavellian mind is not fast. It's patient, not loud. But décisive, not impulsive. But surgical. Because when you slow your mind, you see what the others miss. You hear what was left unsaid. And you move not with haste, but with certainty. Let them call you slow. Let them misjudge your silence. Let them confuse hesitation with hesitation. They will reveal themselves. They will expose their patterns. And when they do, you'll already be 5 moves ahead. Remember this, you don't need to outthink everyone. You just need to think slower than they expect and deeper than they're capable of. control the tempo, and you control the battlefield. On to the next lesson. They told you discipline was about controlling yourself, but they never told you how, so you started suppressing emotions, faking calm, denying pain. That's not discipline, that's fear in a suit. That's emotional starvation, pretending to be power. Suppression is fear dressed as control. Precision is something else entirely. Suppression is a man biting his tongue until it bleeds. Precision is a man speaking one word, and it lands like thunder. Because suppression is reactive. Precision is intentional. Suppression hides the chaos. Precision cuts through it. A suppressed man explodes. A precise man chooses where the fire burns. And who gets to feel it? Discipline is not self-denial. It's self-command. It's knowing what to show and what to weaponize later. Most people think, I shouldn't feel this. I need to be quiet. I can't react. No, that's self-suffocation, not strategy. The truth is, you will feel anger. You will feel shame. You will feel revenge crawling up your spine when someone disrespects you. But you don't need to amputate these instincts. You need to assign them. Like soldiers, you give them roles. You give them timing. You give them targets. Discipline is not silence. It's when your silence becomes unnerving. It's not hiding your emotions. It's when your emotions become deliberate, sharp, calibrated. You don't get there by denial. You get there by refinement. Think of a sniper. He doesn't shoot because he's angry. He shoots because the window opened. That's precision. That's discipline. And that's what most nice people never learn. They're so busy trying to suppress their feelings. They never train them. So when it's time to move, they either explode or freeze. Both are predictable. Both are powerless. But the man with discipline, he doesn't react to chaos. He watches it. He doesn't try to calm the room. He becomes the tension. He doesn't answer disrespect. He designs his absence, because absence, when placed precisely, is more violent than any insult. You don't get control by strangling your emotions. You get control by studying them like enemies. You don't run from fire. You learn to contain it in your palm. Suppression says, don't feel this. Disciplina says, feel it, master it, choose where it lands. Suppression creates shame. Discipline builds leverage. Suppression is what weak men call strength. Discipline is what strong men never need to explain. The next time you feel the rage rise, don't shame it. Watch it, label it, and assign it. That insult, store it. That betrayal, remember it. That humiliation, refine it into silence. So heavy they choke when they see you again. You are not here to be calm. You are here to be surgical. Every word, every look, every pause, deliberate, calculated, untouchable. Because power is not about having no emotions. It's about having emotions that obey. If your feelings still interrupt your strategy, you're not disciplined. You're untrained. And in a world run by signals, that means you're readable. And what's readable is disposable. Discipline is not about killing your emotions. It's about turning them into assassins and placing them exactly where they'll hurt the most. Comfort is not clarity. Routine is not mastery. And doing what you're already good at is not intelligence. It's fear, wearing the mask of competence. You say you're smart. So when was the last time you learned something that made you feel stupid again? Most adults stop learning not because they've mastered life, but because they're terrified of becoming a beginner, of fumbling, of sweating, of being seen struggling. That fear isn't harmless. It calcifies into arrogance. And over time, it becomes identity. I'm just not good at that. I was never the creative type. I don't have the mind for business. That's not truth. That's learned helplessness. And every time you repeat it, you etch your limits deeper into your mind, until eventually, your greatest prison becomes your own self-description. So let me ask you, are you skilled, or just familiar with your cage? A Machiavellian doesn't protect his ego. He dismantles it, piece by piece, by entering discomfort willingly, because that's where real sharpness is forged. Not in praise, not in repetition, but in humiliation. Yes, you will look foolish, learning something new. You will fail. You will struggle to breathe in rooms where others glide. But that tension is where the rust starts to crack. It's like setting fire to your self-delusion, because a man who hasn't learned a new skill in years is not maturing. He's rotting, quietly, elegantly, internally. And then one day, the world changes. And he doesn't. The rules evolve, and he stays the same. And in that moment, intelligence dies. Why? Because the mind is not a vault. It's a blade. And if you don't keep cutting with it, it dulls. That's why the Stoics, the warriors Machiavelli respected, never stopped testing themselves. New languages, new trades, new strategies. Not to perform, but to stay alive. So what about you? Pick up a skill you've always avoided. One that scares you. One where your current self will fail. If you're logical, study art. If you're artistic, study finance. If you're loud, study silence. Every new domain is a mirror, and what you'll see first is weakness. But what you'll find next is possibility. And that's the entire point. If you never feel weak, you'll never grow strong. You don't become dangerous by sharpening what's already sharp. You become dangerous by forging new blades. Where you were once defenseless, a man who masters only what he's always known is a man whose enemies will always know him. But a man who keeps learning what makes him uncomfortable. He's unreadable, he's elastic, he's impossible to contain, because while the rest stay stuck in their expertise, evolves. And that's what makes him terrifying. So stop asking if it's too late. Stop saying you're too old. Stop calculating the payoff. Pick something hard. Pick something humbling. Pick something new and start over. Not because you're lost, but because you're done being stagnant. You want to shatter the illusion of who you think you are. Then do something you're bad at, until you're not. Because every skill you avoid is a piece of power you've given away. And every skill you reclaim is a new territory your enemies can't predict. Now pick your next battlefield. Leçon 5 away. Single lens thinking is suicide. It makes you blind, predictable, and worst of all, manageable. Most people build their minds like cages. They specialize, they narrow, they limit, they become masters of one field, and fools in every other room. They brag about focus, not realizing they've built a prison cell with no windows. And when the world shifts, they're the last to see it coming. So ask yourself, do you analyze everything through one worldview, through the same psychological lens, political bias, cultural dogma? Have you ever questioned the tool you use to make sense of the world? Or are you just polishing the same knife, while your enemies study every weapon on the battlefield? Machiavelli never thought in straight lines. He studied law, history, military strategy, diplomacy, religion, not to master them, but to see where they contradict, where the lies overlap, where the truths cancel each other out. That's how he found power. In the cracks between disciplines. One lens limits what you see, but many lenses, they let you predict what others can't even detect. You start to hear intentions under words. You notice financial patterns in emotional behavior. You see political manipulation inside religious kindness. You catch moral corruption hiding behind corporate language, because every game uses a different language. But power speaks them all, fluently. Imagine being a chess player who only understands pawns. You'll think the queen is too dramatic. You'll ignore the knights. And when you lose, you'll blame the board. That's how most people think. They use one playbook and die confused when it doesn't apply. But you must become mentally ambidextrous. Not just smart, not just fast, but multidimensional. Learn economics to see how desire is priced. Study psychology to decode the silence in a room. Dive into literature to detect manipulation in language. Touch philosophy to know what makes people justify cruelty. You don't need to master everything. You need to recognize the map behind the mask. Because the man who thinks like a strategist in politics, like a poet in negotiation, like a psychologist in conflict, and like a soldier in uncertainty, wins before others even recognize there's a war. Power is not built by collecting knowledge. It's built by knowing which tool to use and when. A single lens leaves you blind to betrayal, to subtext, to the quiet shift in tone that happens before someone stabs you in the back. But when you own many lenses, you see the betrayal before they plan it. You read intentions from facial muscles. You catch political ambition inside compliments. You anticipate before they even know what they're revealing. And that's when they start calling you gifted, intuitive, wise. But you're not gifted. You're trained. You've walked through the minds of many worlds. And now the world is a mirror, not a mystery. So, destroy your narrow lens. Kill the identity that says, I'm a numbers guy. I'm a creative type. I don't get politics. I hate conflict. These aren't truths. They're walls. And behind each wall is a part of the world you've chosen not to control. You don't need to become an expert. You need to become dangerous across dimensions. Enough to survive in every arena. Enough to adapt faster than the chaos around you. Because in the end, the sharpest minds don't just know more. They see deeper because they see wider. They are not trapped by a lens. They choose it. And when it no longer serves them, they throw it away. You want to be unpredictable. Then never give the world one version of your mind. Shift lens. Shift perspectives. Stay unreadable. Now let's go further. The next lesson isn't about learning new truths. It's about unlearning old lies. You think your kindness is a virtue. You think your empathy protects you. You think your openness makes you more human. No. Your kindness is not love, it's hunger. Your empathy is not strength, it's a need to be needed. Your openness is not confidence, it's a cry for connection. They're not virtues, they're signals. And signals can be decoded, used, and weaponized. If they know you need attention, they'll starve you. If they know you need closeness, they'll withhold it. If they know you need to be understood, they'll misinterpret you on purpose. And you'll chase, you'll justify, you'll beg, with logic. But all they see is a man trying to buy affection with intellect. You think you're being emotionally honest, but what you're really doing is confessing your leverage. You're walking into rooms and announcing, this is how to break me. This is where I need love. This is how to make me forget my standards. He's not kind. He's starving. And kindness is his currency. That's how they see you. Do you understand how dangerous emotional hunger is? It turns you into a mirror, always reflecting what they want. It turns you into a sponge, always absorbing their needs. It turns you into prey, always visible, always predictable. They smile, and you melt. They pull away, and you panic. They show you a little intimacy. and you start rewriting your boundaries. They ignore you, and you start giving discounts on your dignity, and they haven't even asked. You offer it just to feel worthy again. This is not connection. This is erosion. This is what happens when you haven't met your own needs and expect others to do it for you. Your emotional hunger is the leash, and they don't have to pull it. They just have to hold it. You don't want love. You want validation. You don't want connection. You want relief from emptiness, from silence, from yourself. And that's why they own you, because they don't have to control your mind. They just have to control your craving. You overgive. You over-explain. You over-accommodate. You lose yourself in every interaction, not because they're powerful, but because your need to be accepted is louder than your self-respect. That's the real enemy. Your hunger speaks louder than your words. And hunger, by definition, is irrational. They say one thing, and you believe it. They say, "I miss you," and you forget how they disappeared. They give you attention, and you forget your standards. You're not being romantic. You're being ruled. And if your emotions can be triggered that easily, you are a puppet, tied to your past, tied to the people who ignored you, tied to the idea that love has to feel like a rescue. It doesn't, and it shouldn't. The man with control doesn't need to be understood. He doesn't need attention. He doesn't flinch when affection is withheld. He's full, emotionally. And when you're full, you're dangerous. Because you stop chasing, you stop explaining, you stop shrinking yourself to fit into people's emotional windows. You become scarce. And in this world, scarcity is power. If they don't know how to trigger you, if they don't know what you need, if they can't predict what makes you fold, you become unreadable, uncontrollable, unbreakable. So ask yourself, are you kind or are you starving? Are you giving or are you negotiating for crumbs? Are you open or are you exposing yourself to anyone who listens? There's a difference, and that difference is power. No one needs to destroy you. All they need is to watch you destroy yourself. Emotionally, say one wrong word to you, make one passive-aggressive move, ignore your message, and suddenly you're spiraling, angry, defensive, reactive, exposed. That's not emotion, that's leverage. And someone else just pulled the string. If you can be provoked, you can be predicted. And if you can be predicted, you can be controlled. So let me ask you, when tension rises in the room, do you rise with it? Or do you lower your voice and raise your position? Machiavelli didn't fear betrayal. He feared impulse, because that's how most men lose everything they've built. Not through war, but through their own emotional stupidity. You think you're being honest when you express yourself, but honesty without control is just a confession to the enemy. Understand this. Every emotion is a weapon. You either wield it, or it's used against. Your emotion is not a man. He's an open door, and anyone with sharp words or soft eyes can walk right in and take what they want. This is why most smart people lose in real life. They think knowing the theory is enough, but theory collapses in the face of emotional pressure. Your degree won't protect you when someone looks you in the eyes and questions your worth. Your resume means nothing when your voice shakes in conflict. Your quotes won't save you when you're baited into rage in front of people who matter. Only control can do that. And control begins where ego ends. Try this. Next time you're insulted, don't respond. Not because you're weak, but because you're watching, because you're calculating the cost of every word. That's the difference between reaction and domination. Anyone can lash out. Anyone can defend. But it takes strategy to absorb the hit, say nothing, and still walk out with the room on your side. That's emotional warfare. And most people are losing it, without even knowing they're in it. You think silence is weakness. Machiavelli called it preparation. You think calmness means surrender. The Stoics called it positioning. You think emotion makes you real. It makes you vulnerable. And in a world built on manipulation, vulnerability without discernment is suicide. So stop worshipping authenticity. Start cultivating composure. Train yourself to sit in discomfort, not to escape it, but to own it. This is your new power. When they yell, you lower your tone. When they rush, you slow down. When they provoke, you smirk. Because now you understand. They are exposed. Not you. The man who cannot be rattled owns the moment, owns the outcome, owns the room. This isn't detachment. This is control, the most dangerous form of presence. And that presence, that stillness in chaos, that cold internal discipline, that is what makes them fear you, because they can't move you. They can't read you. They can't use you. And in a world full of manipulators, that makes you untouchable. Now sharpen your tone. Lesson 8 begins with the one thing that fuels the entire machine. Your body. They think silence is weakness, that it means you have nothing to say, that you're afraid to speak, that you're unsure. Let them think that, because true silence is not absence, it's calculation. It's not emptiness. It's pressure. It's the man at the table who doesn't argue because he already knows who's lying and doesn't need to prove it. It's the man who listens, not because he agrees, but because he's watching who needs to be seen. Silence is expensive because once you master it, you stop bleeding power into conversations that don't deserve you. You stop correcting people who are committed to misunderstanding you. You stop filling dead space just to feel significant. And you start becoming ominous. When you speak less, they fill in the gaps. And their assumptions reveal more than their words ever could. That's the trick. Silence doesn't hide your power. It magnifies it. A loud man is obvious. A silent man is unreadable. And what's unreadable is untouchable. When you don't react, they panic. When you don't explain, they guess. When you don't validate them, they spiral. Because silence, when intentional, is confrontation. And the people who hate silence the most are the ones who benefit from your noise. They want your reaction because that's how they track your position. That's how they measure your emotional price. And every time you speak too fast, over-explain, fill the room with nervous energy, you just gave them your coordinates. But the man who can sit still and say nothing, by being misunderstood, attacked, or ignored, he owns the room without ever touching it. Silence is not about avoiding conflict. It's about choosing your battlefield. Not every war is worth announcing. Not every insult is worth answering. Because silence is how kings respond to clowns. Not with anger, not with defense, with absence. And absence, when timed right, is violence. It says, you are not important enough to provoke me. You will not get the data you want. You no longer get access to my emotions. That's real power. Most people speak to soothe themselves, to feel heard, to calm the storm inside. But when you stop needing to be heard, you become the storm. So ask yourself, can you hold tension without needing to break it? Can you let them misunderstand you without correcting them? Can you sit across from someone who disrespected you and give them nothing? No reaction, no closure, just the weight of your unreadability. That's the man they fear. Because that man, he's not talking, he's studying, he's saving, he's storing every detail for a move they'll never see coming. Silence is not emptiness. It's loaded. It's a signal. It's your most expensive asset. And if you waste it, you're poor. Comfort is not your friend. It is your assassin. And the most dangerous part, it kills quietly. It doesn't stab you in the chest. It seduces you with soft chairs, endless scrolling, passive agreement, emotional safety. And by the time you realize what it's done, you've already surrendered the throne of your own potential. Let me ask you, when was the last time you chose discomfort? Willingly, strategically, not because you had to, but because you refuse to decay. Because if you only grow when life forces you to, you are not sovereign. You are enslaved by ease. Machiavelli wouldn't admire your resilience. He would question your addiction to pleasure. He would ask, why do you need to feel safe? To act. Because real power doesn't bloom in safety. It grows in friction, in calculated exposure to what you fear, what you resist, and what most people avoid. Comfort weakens your instincts. It dulls your urgency. It teaches you to expect warmth, while life sharpens its cold edge. That's why most people never lead. Because leadership is discomfort. Standing alone, being doubted, being misunderstood. But comfort says, stay quiet, blend in, don't risk the pain. And you obey. You scroll. You fantasize. You make lists. You talk about your potential while doing nothing to suffer for it. Discomfort isn't punishment. It's proof you're moving, like a sword in the fire. You don't become sharper by staying still. You evolve by enduring, by resisting ease, by refusing to rot in routine. Ask a soldier how growth feels. Ask a monk how truth arrives. Ask a king how clarity is earned. They'll all tell you the same thing. Through discipline, through sacrifice, through the brutal repetition of things most men avoid. You want to be free? Then train yourself to walk toward pain, not recklessly, but deliberately, because the man who chooses discomfort cannot be controlled by it. Everyone else folds under pressure, but you grow in it. You speak calmly inside chaos. You breathe slowly inside storms. That's not genetics. That's exposure. Every day, you escape the warm trap of comfort. You reclaim something: focus, fire, ferocity. And while they sleep in, you're sharpening. While they retreat from discomfort, you step in with intention. That's the separation. That's what makes a man feared. Not his money, not his looks, not his followers. His ability to say, I feel pain, I stay anyway. So let's be clear. Comfort is the new slavery. It looks like luxury, but it is silent decay. It is the decline of drive, the erosion of ambition, the death of edge. And if you don't rebel against it daily, you'll become another soft voice in a soft crowd, waiting for life to get easier. But Machiavellian minds don't wait. They don't chase comfort. They exploit it. They use it to spot weakness in others, and most importantly, in themselves. So here's your new standard. If it's easy, question it. If it's too familiar, interrupt it. If it asks nothing of you, run from it. Because comfort will kill your instincts before the world ever has a chance to. Lesson 10 is the most underestimated asset in modern warfare. Silence. Loud men crave validation. Silent men control the room. Words are cheap. Reactions are cheaper. But silence is expensive because it costs you your impulse, your need to explain, your need to be seen. And that's why most people can't afford it. They talk because they fear being misunderstood. But here's the truth. The more you speak, the more they can measure you. Your opinions become data. Your emotions become leverage. Your tone becomes a target. And every word you offer is a brick they will use to build the box they'll put you in. Ask yourself, why do you explain? To be right, to be liked, to be clear. No, you explain because you're afraid of being misjudged. But power is not about being understood. Power is about being unreadable. Machiavelli knew. Silence is not passive. It is a strategy. It creates space. It distorts assumptions. It breeds discomfort. In silence, they reveal themselves. They fill the gap. They expose their motives. And they project their fears onto you. You watch. You adjust. You strike. Not in anger, but in perfect precision. That's not coldness. That's warfare. Silence is the pause before the knife. It's the space where fear grows in the enemy's mind. It's the absence that makes them doubt themselves. You don't need to raise your voice. You don't even need to speak. You just need to be present and say nothing. Because when you stop explaining, you start observing. And when you start observing, you become dangerous. You start hearing subtext. You see micro-expressions. You feel when something shifts in the dynamic. And they'll call it intuition. They'll call it mystique. But it's not magic. It's tactical silence. Most men lose arguments not because they're wrong, but because they said too much. They gave up positioning to prove a point. They sacrificed dominance for closure. They chose expression over control. Don't. Learn to let others drown in their own words. Let them show their hand. Let them dig the hole deeper. Your silence is their echo chamber. This doesn't mean you never speak. It means you speak with surgical intent. Every word is placed. Every pause is calculated. Every sentence is a move. And sometimes, no move is the deadliest move. Because silence makes them chase. It makes them project. It makes them fear your thoughts more than your words. They start to ask, what is he thinking? Did he catch that? Why didn't he respond? That's where power begins. Not in volume, but in presence. And in a world addicted to noise, a man who remains silent becomes a myth. So kill the urge to explain. Starve the need to react. Murder the habit of over-communication. Every time you speak, you spend power. So speak like a man who knows his voice is expensive. Because it is. Silence is not emptiness. It's a mirror. It shows people who they are, without your interference. And when you master it, you no longer enter rooms to be heard. You enter rooms to be felt. That's what scares them. Now, sharpen your awareness, because in part 11, we reveal the most underestimated poison in modern life. The people you surround yourself with. Power doesn't always need force. Sometimes, it just needs mystery. When people know everything about you, they stop respecting you. They stop fearing you. And worst of all, they stop watching what they say around you. Because you've shown your hand. You've let them map your next move. You've traded influence for connection. Never reveal your full plan. Never let them think they've figured you out. Mystery is the oxygen of power. When they don't know what you're thinking, they have to guess. And when they guess, they project. They hesitate. They make mistakes. It's not about being deceptive. It's about being unreadable. The most powerful man in the room is the one who listens more than he speaks. The one whose eyes give nothing. The one whose actions seem intentional, but never fully traceable. He's not cold. He's calculating. He doesn't post every thought. He doesn't explain every choice. He doesn't apologize for the silence between his words. Because silence is part of the strategy, you don't owe them clarity. You owe yourself control. Mystery makes them lean in. Oversharing makes them lean back. You want to create uncertainty because uncertainty forces them to be cautious, and caution slows them down. The man who always speaks his plans becomes predictable. The man who speaks selectively becomes dangerous. They ask you where you're going. Smile. Say, forward. They ask what you're working on. Say something precise. They ask what your next move is. Say, you'll feel it. Vagueness isn't cowardice. It's control. The more data they have on you, the easier it is to manipulate you, to time you, to bait you, to weaken you, without ever touching you. Even the truth, in the wrong hands, becomes a liability. That's why you must treat your life like a vault. They may see the exterior, but the blueprint stays inside. Every time you explain yourself to people who don't deserve access, you lower your price, you shrink your mystery, you dilute your influence. The man with mystery never argues. He lets the unknown do the talking. He lets others wonder what he's capable of. He lets rumors carry more weight than confessions, because uncertainty, in a world addicted to answers, is a weapon. So ask yourself, do they know too much about your strategy? Do they feel too confident about your reactions? Have you been too available, too explainable, too loud? You don't need to disappear. You just need to become difficult to decode. Remember, people attack what they can read. They follow what they can't. Mystery is not a personality trait. It's a posture, a conscious stance of power. So stop narrating your next move. Stop performing transparency. Stop solving their curiosity. Start being the man they guess about in quiet rooms, the one they can't predict, the one they feel but can't define. That's not aloof. That's leverage. And in this world, the man with leverage wins. Opinions are cheap. Observations are dangerous. The moment you say, I think, you reveal BS. You show your emotion. You open a door, and someone stronger walks through it. Now ask yourself, when did you last confuse your feelings for facts? They said something. You reacted, not because it was true, but because it touched your wound. That's how weak men live. Opinionated, reactive, blind to reality. But a Machiavellian mind doesn't feel first. It sees first, then it waits, then it moves. Silently. You don't say they're arrogant. You observe posture, pacing, eye control. You don't say they're trustworthy. You observe patterns, pressure responses, subtle tells. Because when you observe, you're collecting leverage. When you opinionate, you're just echoing your insecurity. Most people aren't thinking. They're just projecting. They aren't analyzing. They're defending their emotional identity. I just feel like he's wrong. She gives me a bad vibe. He's not authentic. These aren't insights. They're symptoms. Symptoms of untrained minds, of fragile egos. Mistaking reaction for intuition. Observation is colder. It's quieter. It's slower. But it's deadly. Because the observer is never surprised. He sees the signs others ignore. The micro moves. The slips in speech. The power imbalances under every conversation. He doesn't speak to be heard. He speaks to shift outcomes. That's strategy. Opinions seek agreement. Observations seek advantage. And in a world obsessed with having a take, you become untouchable by refusing to play the same game. You don't join debates. You dissect them. You don't argue beliefs. You analyze motives. You don't get triggered. You get information. This is how you become dangerous in silence. They're ranting. You're reading them. They're emoting. You're calculating. They think you're passive. But you're positioning. Observation makes you predictive. You start seeing things before they're said. Moves before they're made. Weakness before it's shown. Because everyone leaks. But only trained eyes see it. Now let's be clear. This isn't detachment. This is precision. You're not emotionless. You're emotionally disciplined. You feel, but you don't flinch. That's the difference. A reactive man plays defense. An observing man plays chess. One chases justice. The other exploits human nature. You want clarity. Here's your new rule. Before you form an opinion, collect 3 observations. Before you react, ask, what's really being said? What's not being said? What am I being pulled into? Because power isn't loud, it's aware. And when you replace your opinions with pure attention, you become immune to manipulation. Why? Because manipulation only works on the unaware, on those who rush to label, on those who jump to feel. But you've trained your lens. You've slowed your mind. You don't need to speak. You just need to see. And that, in every room, is the most terrifying presence of all. Now, sharpen that lens. Because lesson 13 is about the mirror most people fear, self-reputation, and how the world treats you, based on what you silently tolerate. The world doesn't ask who you are. It tests what you'll allow. They don't study your values. They study your reactions, your silence, your thresholds. Because in power, perception is currency, and the fastest way to bankrupt yourself is to tolerate what weakens you. Most people don't get disrespected suddenly. They get slowly reshaped by the things they let slide. One skipped standard, one unaddressed insult, one fake apology accepted too fast. Not because they're kind, but because they're afraid to lose access, and that's the trap. You'd rather be included than respected. But inclusion without dignity is just a quieter form of submission. Let me ask you, what have you allowed that you still resent in silence? Who walks around you like they own the air? Who do you serve with your compliance? Because you fear confrontation more than corrosion. That is not compassion. That is codependence. You're teaching them something. Every time you avoid the confrontation, you're whispering, disrespect me. I won't leave. Violate my standards. I'll stay polite. Make me small. I'll applaud your comfort. And over time, they believe you. The world believes you. Because in silence, you're signing a contract. You think you're keeping peace, but you're actually giving permission. And permission becomes pattern. Pattern becomes expectation. And expectation becomes your identity. Machiavelli never begged for respect. He created consequences. Not with tantrums, not with rage, with calculated withdrawal, with silent detachment, because nothing scares a manipulator more than the person who doesn't need to explain why they walked away. No warning, no closure, just absence. Brutal, clean, final. That's power. See, you can't control how people act, but you can control how long they access you after they reveal who they are. You don't need revenge. You need recalibration. You want to reset how the world treats you, then destroy your tolerance for passive disrespect, subtle sarcasm, guilt-coated manipulation, forced humility, performative kindness. Burn it all, because what you tolerate in silence becomes the terms of your existence. And here's the cost. You stop believing in your own fire. You shrink to match their comfort. You abandon your standards in exchange for their approval. But approval is cheap, and it never protects you. You want to be seen as a man of weight. Then weigh your boundaries. Measure every allowance. Audit every. It's fine, because nothing in your life changes until your tolerance collapses. When you stop letting it slide, you stop getting slid over. When you stop explaining your worth, you stop being treated like a convenience. That's when the shift happens. People recalibrate. The weak fall off. The sharp start showing up, not because you changed them, but because you changed you and your new standard. Force their evolution or their exit. Both are wins. So here's the rule. You are not what you say you are. You are what you enforce. What you walk away from What you let no one repeat twice. Let the world adjust to your absence, before it ever gets to abuse your presence. Lesson 14 is even colder. You are not owed peace. Unless you first master conflict. You want peace. Then, sharpen your sword. Because real peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the presence of strength. The world doesn't give peace to those who beg for it. It gives it to those who can end the noise with a single move. You were taught wrong. You were told that being above drama is noble. That walking away is always mature. That ignoring disrespect earns you the moral high ground. But Machiavelli knew better. He knew what you ignore festers. What you avoid grows teeth. And what you never confront eventually becomes your cage. So ask yourself, how many situations in your life exist today because you chose peace over precision? How many people walk over you because you confused conflict with weakness? Conflict isn't weakness. It's a mirror. It shows you what you're made of and what they fear. Weak men avoid conflict because it makes them uncomfortable. Powerful men design conflict to reset the game. Not emotionally, not recklessly, strategically. Every act of power begins with a confrontation, of a lie, of a dynamic, of a boundary that's been crossed in silence too long. You think silence keeps the peace? No, silence just delays the war. And the longer you delay, the more ammunition they gather, the more bold they become, the more silent you look. But when you master conflict, you no longer react. You provoke on purpose. You test their temperature. You reveal their cards. You flip the power dynamic, not with volume, but with presence. Here's what most people don't understand. Conflict doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be toxic. It doesn't even need to be public. It just needs to be clear. The most powerful conflicts are surgical. One sentence, one silence, one exit. Conflict becomes art when you use it to reveal truth, not to feed your ego. So next time you feel the tension rise, don't numb it. Don't pacify it. Don't run. Use it. Say the thing no one else will say. Withdraw when they expect you to engage. Confront with calm and watch them panic. Because most people expect chaos. They expect yelling, blaming, explosions. But when you stay still and strike with clarity, they crumble. Why? Because you weren't reactive. You were ready. That's mastery. Conflict mastered is power contained. Power contained becomes fear. And fear becomes respect. You don't need to argue. You don't need to explain. You just need to correct. Once. With no hesitation. With no apology. With no permission. And when you do, the game changes. You are no longer the nice guy. You are now the final line. The man who does not tolerate erosion. The man who trades silence for structure. So from now on, if peace is your goal, let conflict be your sword. Not because you love war, but because you've studied it, and you now own it. Lesson 15 is your final transition. Because there's one thing even more dangerous than conflict. Reputation. And what happens when you stop chasing it and start weaponizing it? Your image is what they see. Your reputation is what they fear. One is decoration. The other is deterrence. You've been taught to protect your image. Smile often. Look agreeable. Be seen as a good guy. But Machiavelli never cared about being liked. He cared about being calculated. Because the man who obsesses over image ends up in rooms full of flattery and zero respect. But the man who cultivates reputation like a weapon never has to raise his voice. He enters, and the room adjusts. Let me ask you, what enters the room before you speak? What do people feel? Not because you said anything, but because of the history your presence carries. That's reputation. It's not what you claim. It's what people expect when your name is mentioned. And here's the brutal truth. You are either known for what you enforce or remembered for what you allowed. That's why image is cheap and reputation is earned in war. It's built from how you handle betrayal, disrespect, pressure, power. It's shaped by your thresholds, your silence, your exits. And once it's established, it becomes your most efficient form of control. Because people stop testing you, not out of kindness, but out of calculation. They remember. You don't repeat yourself. You don't beg. You don't return. They remember the stories, how you left that company and took the clients with you, how you cut off the fake friend with surgical precision, how you spoke once, and it ended the conversation. That's reputation. It doesn't need a bio. It doesn't need marketing. It moves without you. But here's the key. You don't control reputation by micromanaging what people think. You control it by consistently being who people fear misjudging. You're not mysterious because you hide. You're mysterious because you're selective with presence. You're not dangerous because you talk tough. You're dangerous because people don't know how you'll respond, but they know there's a price. And once they believe there's a price, you've already won. Your reputation should do 3 things. 1. Eliminate waste. You don't attract chaos. You repel it. 2. Preframe power. People think twice before lying to you, disrespecting you, or manipulating you, because they remember what happened the last time. 3. Buy you silence. Your absence becomes louder than others' presence. You don't need to explain. Your pattern already speaks. So stop polishing your image. Start building your record. Let your moves tell the story. Let your absences draw fear. Let your consistency create legend. Because once you weaponize your reputation, you no longer chase anything. Not approval, not validation, not even revenge. You just exist, and the world corrects itself around you. Now that you've sharpened the mind, the presence, the strategy, and the boundaries, there's only one thing left. The transformation isn't in what you've learned. It's in what you now refuse to forget. Let's step into the final silence. Outro begins next. He never raised his voice, but the room grew quiet when he entered. He never begged for loyalty, but betrayal feared his memory. He never chased power, but power arrived when he withdrew. They called him cold, detached, too calculating, but they never saw him lose, because he wasn't built to be liked. He was built to last. You won't find him in crowds. He doesn't perform for claps. Always like a shadow, silent, strategic, final. Where others panic, he calculates. Where others speak, he observes. Where others want peace, he prepares for war. Not because he loves the fight, but because he refuses to be owned. He's not the loudest in the room, but he's the last one standing after everyone else has been exposed. And maybe, just maybe, that's why they fear him. Not for what he says, but for what he sees. Not for who he pretends to be, but for what he's willing to walk away from. No ceremony, no closure, just the weight of his absence and the echo of a man who built his silence into power. You were never meant to fit in. You were meant to disrupt. And now that you remember who you are, don't explain it. Live it. You don't fail because you're stupid. You fail because you let the world shape your mind and called it intelligence. You mistake fast thinking for smart strategy. You confuse clever words with controlled